Wednesday, the third week of Lent. I remember a number of years ago reading in the newspaper an interview by a reporter with a man who had been in prison for a number of years. The man was maybe in his late 40s or 50s and had been in and out of jail and prisons for much of his life. And the reporter at one point asked the man, what has been the worst, the saddest day of your life? And this prisoner responded without having to think about it very much. He said, it was a day when I was in another prison before this one. He said, I was walking around the prison yard and I noticed that this young guy who had just arrived at the prison was staring at me. And he wouldn't stop staring at me. So I got really upset and I walked up to him and I was pretty ticked off, and I just said, hey man, what are you looking at? In a really aggressive way. And this young guy, who was 20 or 30 years younger than I was at that point, looked at me, said, I'm looking at you because you're my father. The older man was devastated. First of all, that he did not even recognize his own son, his own flesh and blood. But secondly, he said, even worse than that was realizing that my own son had followed in my footsteps. He was in prison like I was. And it really, really devastated this older man. This is a great lesson for all of us to realize that we all have a great responsibility, especially parents and grandparents, to teach children and grandchildren good things, good values, to teach them how to be good Catholics, to teach them how to be good Protestants or Jews or Buddhists or Muslims, whatever religion it might be, to teach that younger generation good values so they can grow up learning from their elders what life is all about. Our first reading from Deuteronomy features Moses telling basically the Israelites that very lesson. It says, teach your children and your children's children about these laws, about what God has done for you. Don't forget about it yourself, but then also pass it on to the next generation so they too can grow up in this same faith that we have, this knowing this amazing God of ours. And so that's a wonderful lesson. But then Jesus broadens it to go beyond parents and grandparents. He says that all of us are teachers, all of us who teach others to do right, to do good things, to follow Jesus' teachings and commandments, to follow the law, they're great in the kingdom of heaven. How important it is for the older generation to teach the younger generation about faith. And that's why I love when I see parents bringing their kids to church and teaching them how to dip their finger into the holy water and make the sign of the cross, passing that faith on to their kids or grandparents doing that, explaining a stained glass window, an image of a saint, a statue, going up, pointing at the tabernacle. Jesus is in there. I mean, all these things that will form a solid foundation for the children among us, the next generation. But again, as Jesus says, we all are responsible for that, not just biological parents and grandparents, but all of us have a responsibility of living our faith and in that way inspiring others, teaching others, showing others what good values are, what it means to be a good Catholic. And I think especially during this time of the coronavirus, especially again parents, but all of us, but especially parents and grandparents, this can be a great teaching moment for the younger generation, that they not see you frantic and panicking, but that they see you coming to this situation with faith and say, no, God is with us somehow. We'll get through this, and providing that leadership, but more than that, providing that sense of God's presence and love so that kids know when they have their own share of difficulties in life, they'll think back on this moment and say, gosh, I remember mom or grandpa or whoever, really with deep faith in the midst of that terrible time with the coronavirus. We don't know the seeds that we're planting. So my brothers and sisters, let us all take responsibility to grapple with our present reality, but whatever situation we're faced with, to remember to be cognizant, to be aware of the fact that we have a great responsibility of passing our faith, passing our belief in God, our trust in God on to others, the younger generation and others.